Welcome to the annual Andrew Murray commemorative conversation presented by Huguenot College in Wellington, South Africa. These conversations are held annually on the 9th of May to celebrate Andrew Murray's birthday, but also to discuss the meaning of his legacy for today. Andrew Murray became minister of the Dutch Reformed Church in 1871, and he served this congregation until his retirement in 1906. He stayed on in his house Clairvaux, next to the Mission Institute, where he continued his writing until his death in 1970. During his ministry in Wellington, Andrew Murray was instrumental in the founding of the Huguenot Seminary, as well as the Mission Institute. The Huguenot Seminary for Girls opened its doors in January 1874, and the Mission Institute started 3 years later in 1877. The inspiration for the Huguenot Seminary came from the work of Mary Lyon and the Mount Holyoke Seminary in Massachusetts, in the United States. After reading a book in which Mary Lyon describes Mount Holyoke and its programs for girls, Murray wrote her a letter requesting advice and support to open a similar institution in Wellington, where young women could receive an education but also spiritual guidance. At the end of 1873, 2 staff members from Mount Holyoke arrived in Wellington to assist Andrew Murray in establishing the Huguenot Seminary: Dr. Abby Park Ferguson and Miss Anna Bliss. A number of institutions grew out of the Huguenot Seminary: a school for boys and a school for girls, which was later merged to become the Huguenot High School; a training college for teachers, which later became part of the Faculty of Education of the Cape Peninsula University of Technology; and the Huguenot College, which later became the Huguenot University College. The Huguenot University College was closed in 1948 and reopened in 1951 as the Huguenot College, a training institution for social welfare professionals, community development practitioners, youth workers, early childhood development practitioners, and missionaries. When the Mission Institute was closed in 1962, some of its programs were carried over to the Huguenot College. The topic for the 2017 Andrew Murray commemorative conversation is the development of a missional spirituality in the Dutch Reformed Church for the 21st century. The moderator for this conversation today is Dr. Frederick Murray from the University of Stellenbosch, the Faculty of Theology there.
Well, what an inspiring morning we had this morning. Thanks to all your different contributions. So, Len, can I ask with you just to give us a summary of your speech, and then Berdaan Marie.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. I'm Len Hansen. I'm at the Faculty of Theology in Stellenbosch. I spoke about spirituality and what the concept spirituality means, as there are so many different definitions of it, and that it's really a blurry concept. And because we all have some kind of spirituality, or we all are experts on our spirituality, we all also have our own definitions of what spirituality is. The important points that I wanted to make is that spirituality, unlike how it's often perceived, does not only concern one's experiences, it also concerns life and how we experience life and how we act in life, how we act towards others in our daily lives. Also about differences in spiritualities, different spiritualities, Christian spiritualities, that you find differences within not only traditions broadly, but also within denominations, even within congregations, and even so far as to say that one can get different spiritualities within a single family. And that these differences are not necessarily bad. In fact, they can be beneficial to the church or to a congregation, as the different emphases that one finds within these spiritual types of spiritualities serve as correctives to where there's an overemphasis of something like, say for instance, a silence as opposed to action, as opposed to emotion, different kinds of worship, a strong emphasis on rationality and teaching. So in that sense, we all, with our different spiritualities, help each other. And then finally, I also refer to the Christian spiritual disciplines as places or examples of how we practice our spirituality, where we can find faces of our spirituality, and that it's often in the explanation, the form, the frequency, the importance, the theological foundations of these spiritual practices that we find the differences between traditions or denominations.
Thank you, Len, Breda, and then we shift the focus to missional spirituality.
Yes, I'm Breda Ludik from Elderberg Dutch Reformed Church in Somerset West. I was asked to speak about missional spirituality, and I started by exploding the word first, saying, I asked the question, is there any other kind of spirituality than missional spirituality? Because I understand Christian spirituality to be inherently missional, but it has become necessary to tack something onto spirituality to get that right again. But the same question could also be flipped. We could also ask, is there any other kind of missionality? And the very fact that we can ask questions like these tells us there's something wrong. We can have a missionality with an impoverished spirituality that isn't really rooted in spirituality, and it can be a kind of ideology or propaganda if it's not rooted in spirituality. We need spirituality to really practice Christian missionality. We really do need it. I find the new, well, not that new anymore, but more than 2 decades now, 3 decades, through the work of David Bosch, New Begin, the Missional Church book, to be a very good corrective, but it's not always followed. And the problem, I think, is because people do not understand that below all of that, it's not just a new approach. It's an approach that has a new source. Well, actually, the old source, but it's rerouted itself in the old source, which is spirituality. But you can also have an impoverished. You can have a spirituality with an impoverished missionality, where people can become very self-absorbed. They can be rooted in an understanding of God that does not make them missional. It's about me and my journey, me and my God. And if you understand God in that way, you are always going to be in trouble, because God is not like that. The God of the Bible is a God intimately involved with all of creation, with all of mankind. So I put 5 questions on the table that I think need some good thought, but also some good. We need to look at ourselves and ask deeper questions than the mere rational aspects of these questions. The first is, what is our operational understanding of the nature of God? And I was using the word operational. I meant what really, in your understanding of God, changes the way you, or influences the way you approach everything you do. And it's not always what we vocalize. It's often something that lies at a deeper level. And we were taught certain phrases. We can very easily account for who God is with these phrases. But there's something at a deeper level that has a much bigger influence. And we need to dig down to find that. We need to test it by the tradition and in Scripture and find what our operational understanding of the nature of God is. And we're not going to change that by just getting more information. It's going to be changed by practices, and that's, I think, where spirituality can bring us to a point, healthy spirituality that's based in good practices, which also brings the Bible back into play in various ways, and good liturgy. We need liturgy that brings us into the presence of God, to properly understand the nature of God. And then the other four questions: what is our operational worldview? Which is something has a lot to do with what we think, where we think God is, maybe. But how does God, what is the relationship between God and our world? Where is He in our world? Is He there? Is He somewhere up there? We need to think critically about that. And the third question also has a kind of broad overlap with the first two. What is our operational understanding of the nature of human beings? Which is to say, where do we fit in? How do we stand in a relationship with God? That's a very Calvinist thing to say. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand the nature of man if we are to understand God. And then the next two questions I put on the table are basically, well, they flow from this. Where does the energy for Christian life come from? Is it from the ego? I think we often use that to motivate people, ego-driven kinds of approaches, or is it energy, kind of spontaneous combustion coming from an encounter with God, in whichever way? And then the last question: who or what determines the agenda? Do we actually enter into processes of discernment to find the agenda in God's hands, to ask Him to send us, to call us where He's already at work? Or do we sort of draw up a plan and then ask God to get on board? What determines the agenda? So those are the questions I thought, without giving answers, I think we need some good thought and at different levels find good ways of relating to these questions if we are to get to a point where we know a missional spirituality has taken shape. So,
thank you, Marie, and your contribution concentrate on your own journey as a pastor in the Reformed tradition.
Thanks, Frederick. My name is Marie. I'm from Stellenbosch, Moedergemeente. Yes, I was asked to talk a little bit about my own journey with spirituality and the influence on the ministry. I think one can only tell your story when you're talking about your spirituality, because it's so part of your whole life. I realized that there was particular times in my journey that things changed, and I realized that my spirituality was formed and grow, especially in times when there was real honesty. I realized that that's quite a key word in my own story, in my spiritual life, to be brutal honest with myself and with God and with people around me. So that was one of the first things. I also think that a crucial part of my own journey was to accept my own brokenness and to realize that in my brokenness I'm loved. And so honesty, brutal honesty, brokenness, and also in a certain sense, the courage to go deeper into myself. And on that journey, I think I've been asking two questions that came from our own Father Calvin: knowledge of God and the knowledge of myself. Who am I? And who's God? And I think that was a very important part of my journey, to realize who God is even further than my own theological thoughts and concepts and structures, and also realize who I truly am, also deeper than my false selves and the expectations of other people and all that came to me in my life. So that was also part of an important part of the journey. And then realizing on this journey there was a few disciplines that really helps me. I think that in my journey, this discipline of spiritual direction, finding somebody who really journey with me, giving me a safe space to engage in and be honest to myself and that person, the discipline of silence and solitude, of lectio divina, centering prayer, the daily examen, to reflect on where God is every day, in every moment in my life. And at the end, just realizing that this journey and these disciplines really influence my whole ministry. The point from where I operate, I think, changes, and then everything else changes in a sense. So while we're talking now, also I just realized it changes relationships. It changes your thinking about decision making in your congregation. It changes how you go into a service and your preaching. So I think, spirituality at the end, I think, also changes my theology. So I think it's
You used the word integration, and I think, Brada, you also referred to it, that in a sense, this is what we are looking for. How do we integrate as pastors the confession, the theory, and what we do every day? How, and I've heard that you said the spiritual practices helped you a lot in that. You also mentioned that Dirkie Smith, in his definition of spirituality, said it's about practices, it's about beoefening.
Yes.
Would you like to say more about it?
Yes, that in a certain sense you cannot speak just about your relationship with God and your experience of God and your experiences in life of God and in your own life, in the journey of your life, without it having an influence on the way you act and the way you live.
Yeah.
And your response in action also to those meetings you have with God through your life.
So at the end we had a very interesting question from a layperson who said when he was young he had an encounter with God, and it seems he had to leave the church because he could not find direction. It was as if the church said to him, no, you can't hear God. We will tell you what God supposed to tell you. Something like that, Brada. Your reaction to this, you referred to spiritual direction. How do we guide people on their journey?
It's, I think the question, the approach, you just say, no, these are the rules, you stay within these boundaries. We've come to understand that God sometimes does work in mysterious ways.
Yes.
We need to take seriously stuff people come to with us. Sometimes it's, a lot of quirky stuff would come your way, but it wouldn't take that long to sort it out. I think also if you're a good listener, there's also some discernment that needs to be done about what is behind the question or the experience, and it can become quite a good process, even though it starts at a strange place, or it can be an affirmation that surprises me. Now I can get to a point where I have to tell the person, I can affirm what you are saying. That was from God. We always have to be open to the fact that God might sometimes think about stuff that I haven't thought about yet.
Sometimes or always.
Well, yes. But that doesn't sort of give us a carte blanche to say, well, anything goes.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
needs
of
to be
course
discernment. I think that's the big word.
Yeah.
We need to, but we need to find out how to be more discerning. And there aren't any techniques to it. There are things you can do that would sort of create a safer space to do it. But I think Marie Ignatius is probably one of the best sources of ways to go about discernment. But in the end, Ignatius never forced himself on people. He always said, it's between you and God. I will help you to open up a space where you and God can be in a healthy encounter. And I will help listen to you, and he could play into that. But and Calvin did pretty much the same in many ways. But discernment needs to be one of our big words more and more.
So, it's 100 years since the death of Andrew Murray. We're in Wellington this morning at Huguenot College, talking about a retreat centre for spirituality, Andrew Murray Retreat Centre. After this encounter, this conversation this morning, what do you see for the future?
I think there's a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement to think of us or the church starting a centre for spirituality here. I think it's very apt that it will be named after Andrew Murray, because Andrew Murray was he was not your run-of-the-mill theologian pastor for his time, and he thought and he wrote out of the box, if one can say it that way, and I think that's what we need at this time. We need courage and we need curiosity. We need a willingness to embrace our own tradition, but also a willingness to learn from others. And I think Andrew Murray will be a good guide in doing that.
Oh, I can just say I think it's absolutely a wonderful gift for our church, and it's on the right time. And I think people are really exciting about it. But while you were talking about discernment, Breda, I think that will be part of this process of the whole time discerning where God is and where is God leading us, also as church and as part of the Reformed tradition.
I think it's a very good thing to anchor a retreat centre like this in someone who could really bring life and missional activity and spirituality together the way he did. At the same time, I think he would also urge us to go further than he ever did.
Yeah.
And but to keep what he did, because I think only now we're starting to rediscover what he actually brought about and what the roots, the deep roots were. And I think it's very good to be anchored in someone like that, to carry his name forward, but also to say his legacy should be bigger than what he could accomplish in his own lifetime.
Well, it's always true that a pioneer, people don't understand him at that when he operates, when he lives, when he acts, and it's 100 years later, and maybe it's now the time where we can reconnect with it. Let me conclude with a quote from Andrew Murray. Faith expects from God what is beyond all expectations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.